Welcome everyone again. As you come in, again, feel free to put your name, organization, and community location in the chat. But given that it is 2 p.m. Eastern, I think we are just going to dive right in because we have a busy agenda ahead of us today. So just want to say a big welcome, hello, thank you, welcome to today's Talking is Teaching Communities webinar, Sidewalk Math, integrating math and play into your community. Thank you for joining us today. Exciting to have another Talking is Teaching Communities webinar for you all. I'm Mia Fielke, and I am a Senior Program Associate with Too Small to Fail, which is the Early Childhood Initiative of the Clinton Foundation. I know that folks are still starting to come in, but before we begin, I just want to start off with a few quick housekeeping rules for you all to keep in mind. First, we ask that everyone keeps their microphones on mute and to please turn your cameras on if possible. We'd love to see everyone here. If you have any questions that come up during the webinar, please put them into the chat, and we will have Q&A sessions or segments of this webinar where we will be able to get to your questions. Finally, just as a heads up that this webinar is recorded and will be made available on our website. So now I would like to turn it over for a brief welcome from Patty Miller, CEO of Too Small to Fail. So welcome, Patty, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mia, and good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to see so many people from across the country on today's webinar. Really excited to have you here for today's amazing conversation with our partners from across the country on Sidewalk Math. As Mia mentioned, I'm Patty Miller, CEO of Too Small to Fail, which is the Early Childhood Education Initiative of the Clinton Foundation. We have been working for about 8 years to support parents and caregivers with information and tools to promote young children's early brain and language development. And our initiative is really based on research that shows how critical those first 5 years are for young children's brain development. And what we also know from the research is that the best thing, the most important thing parents and caregivers can do is talk, read, and sing with their young children from the very moment that they're born. So as we have worked on Too Small to Fail, we've really worked on how can we make those small moments, those moments of talking, reading, and singing, how can we make those big for children and families? And how can we create communities where those moments can happen, as often as possible? So that's what we do at Too Small to Fail. And the way we are able to do this is because of all of the amazing partners on this call today. We have national partners from across the country. We have amazing community partners from across the country. And that's really what makes this work happen. Thrilled to say that we have 37 community Talking is Teaching campaigns across the country and 2 state campaigns, and that is always constantly growing. And there's so much more about Too Small to Fail that we don't really have time to talk about today. I encourage you to go to talkingisteaching.org or to the clintonfoundation.org to learn more about Too Small to Fail. But what I wanted to say is that what we try and do at Too Small to Fail is really meet parents and caregivers where they are. And we try and reach them in innovative ways to support their young children's development. And I'm just so excited to be able to learn more today and share more about Sidewalk Math, which has just been truly an innovative approach to meeting families and children where they are. And so I wanted to say a big thank you to Sidewalk Math for all that you do and for your partnership. And then I also just wanted to give a big shout out to our community partners, many of whom you'll hear from today, about how they've taken Sidewalk Math, this truly amazing concept, and have integrated into their communities in some really just terrific and innovative ways. So just excited for this conversation today, and just wanted to say thank you all for joining us. And Mia, turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Patty. I am going to share my screen again, so please excuse me. There we go. All right, so learning outcomes. During this webinar, we're hoping that you'll learn about what Sidewalk Math is and how Sidewalk Math patterns encourage play and early math learning. You also hear about best practices and lessons learned from community partners, as Patty mentioned, who have already integrated the Sidewalk Math decals into everyday spaces. And we will also be having a bonus session today from 3 to 3:20 p.m. Eastern You'll learn tips and tricks for actually applying these decals. So we encourage you to stick around for that as well. We have, as I mentioned, a very busy agenda, starting with a deep dive of Sidewalk Math and the Sidewalk Math team. We'll then hear from our partners who've already installed the decals in San Francisco, Elgin, Illinois, and Philadelphia. And we will have time again for Q&A, so feel free to put questions into the chat if they come up. And then we will wrap up with that bonus session. We'll also have Q&A there. So again, feel free to put questions into the chat should they come up. Before I turn it over to the Sidewalk Math team, I want to provide a bit of background on how all of this actually came to be. So in the past 2 years, Too Small Fail has developed a partnership with Sidewalk Math, which is a project by Lesley University's Creative Commons to turn 2 of their early math patterns into sticker decals. This partnership really began as the pandemic was surging in the summer of 2020. And these decals really offered an opportunity for kids and families to engage in fun early math activities while still being socially distanced. And so we first launched these decals at our 2020 Laundry Cares Literacy Summit. And one of these decals, which you see on the left, these could be placed on the floor, kind of like hopscotch. The other decal on the right was a double-sided decal that could be placed on a window. Last year, we were able to distribute over 100 sets of these decals. And as many of you may know, this month, various Talking is Teaching community partners who requested these decals over the winter will also be receiving sets soon. So we hope that during this webinar, those of you who will be receiving the decals will learn more about ways that you might integrate them into your community. And for those of you who are new to this project or new to Talking is Teaching, we hope that this webinar will inspire you on the innovative ways that families can engage in early math in everyday spaces. And we also have an announcement that these decals will be available for sale and audience purchase later this year. I'll provide more details on that near the end of the webinar. But now I'm very delighted to introduce the Sidewalk Math team, who have just been absolutely phenomenal partners. Art Barnage is a mathematics educator and designer, and Sidewalk Math is actually his brainchild. Dr. Martha McKenna is a university professor emerita at Lesley University, and Dr. Corey Barnage is an early education specialist. So thank you, all of you, for being here today. I will turn it over to you three to share more about Sidewalk Math and why early math.
Now that I'm unmuted, this is Art Barnage. I'm thrilled to see all of you here and talk to you about Sidewalk Math. I started this project about 10 years ago. I used to sit at a Thai restaurant in Cambridge, have lunch there every day and watch the kids walk on the sidewalks outside. I had the window seat, and I saw that the sidewalks for them were deserts. They didn't do much, they didn't see much, they didn't play much. And I wondered whether watching some kids play hopscotch one day, whether we could turn the sidewalks into some wonderful plaything that helped kids learn math. Unfortunately, hopscotch has no mathematical patterns, and mathematical patterns are the key to number sense, and number sense is the key to a good education, actually. This is this quote from the National Governors Association says it all. Studies find that the mathematics knowledge acquired in early childhood and early elementary grades is a critical foundation for long-term success. Turns out, beyond imagination, that having number sense when you're getting number sense and entering school with number sense means that you have a much better chance at not only being good in math, but being good in reading. It's amazing. So we're thrilled to join with the Clinton Foundation, It's Too Small to Fail, and with Fastsigns in putting some more of these designs into decals that can be put up in all kinds of places, including laundromats, hospitals, and other places that kids can come and play, dance, and move around. Let me talk to you a little bit about number sense. It's for young kids, number sense is just about counting. And what we want to do is get kids counting everywhere and everything. Studies, it's, as I said, it's the best predictor of school success. And it involves patterns in both shapes and number. So next slide, please. So this is a number sense pattern, a sidewalk math pattern that we call dragons, count the dragons. And you'll notice that there's a pattern in shapes with the number of points representing the number that's in the center, and that you're counting from 1 to 10, 1 to 12 on these shapes. And what we like to do is have kids actually go, and Martha's going to show you in a little bit how kids will go from dancing from one shape to another shape, saying the numbers and counting the numbers up. Think about number sense as counting. Count forwards, count backwards. Counting forwards, by the way, is like addition. Counting backwards is subtraction. Counting by 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, counting by twos is multiplication and division. So you prepare kids by doing all of these patterns. And we had patterns of odd numbers, patterns of odd and even numbers, patterns of circles and sizes and shapes all together. I'm getting just too excited, too many things to talk about. And our goal is, in all of this, is to get parents and caregivers to count with their babies. That's the sense of building number and the sense of using number to prepare for life. Thank you.
Next. Art is the originator of Sidewalk Math. This was his idea, to use math patterns on sidewalks in and around urban schools to engage young children in learning math in informal settings. He focused for nearly half a century on improving math learning. He's a humble man, but most recently focusing on young children because he believes that students who enter schools with number sense succeed since they're able to see the patterns for mathematics, the science of patterns. Sidewalk Math has extended from sidewalks and schoolyards to floors of early childhood and kindergarten classrooms. Next slide. But you don't need to paint the patterns. You can also chalk the patterns wherever children play. We were asked to chalk the patterns at the Boston Children's Museum. Children were drawn to explore the patterns and engage with us in new learning. Next slide. In order to better understand the impact of Sidewalk Math on developing number sense, we engaged teachers across Massachusetts in the Sidewalk Math Inquiry Project. Teachers from urban, suburban, and rural area schools collaborated with us on assessing what children learned from engaging with sidewalk math patterns in their schools, and we learned a lot. They discovered that students engage in kinetic activities spontaneously with these designs. They became the basis for learning math and sharing newfound math skills and devising new number games. They would create games that we hadn't even imagined. But most importantly, students with disabilities or those without number recognition skills offer the most noticeable improvement and enhanced engagement with numbers on patterns on sidewalks, schoolyards, floors, and carpets. Next, please. Teachers went beyond the activities we suggested to engage their students in creative play and math activities. Students similarly created new games on the patterns that drew upon their creativity. We know that parents in laundromats will do the same, encouraging their children to talk about what they notice on the decals and supporting activities that children create using the patterns. So the patterns can engage children in demonstrating counting skills, building gross motor skills when they're on the floor by jumping, tiptoeing, walking backwards, hopping on them, building fine motor skills by drawing, coloring, and cutting out shapes to make their own patterns, sparking creativity with songs, games, creating art, pretending and developing new patterns, and encouraging students to take the initiative for their own learning. And in images you'll see later on laundromats and in hospitals where it's used, you'll see just that. Next slide. We are now thrilled that the Sidewalk Math decals are being used in laundromats to engage children in gaining number sense. This pattern, Count Dragon, is most often seen on floors and on walls. It invites children to step or point on the walls while counting to 12. Children can identify colors and shapes. They can count the points to reach the number painted on the design. And all of these activities prepare or reinforce children what they're learning in schools. So you see the one in terms of sides, it has just one side, the circle. The ellipse has two sides, the triangle 3, the square 4, the pentagon 5, and then it goes up to 6. And then when you get to 7, you add a triangle to a square, or to 8, 2 squares. So the children start to look at the patterns and try to figure out, how do we get to that number? So they're learning math, they're learning counting, they're learning addition, they're learning shapes, they're learning colors. It's a magical pattern. Next. It was a graduate student from Spain who was working with us who introduced us to this unique pattern of hopscotch played in her country and in Spanish-speaking countries around the world. Whether using feet to walk or hop on the pattern or using fingers to point around the boxes, children will learn to count to 17 using numbers and counting dots. Counting dots reinforces children understanding that numbers are the product of counting things. I'm going to move it now on to Corey. You're next.
The next slide, please. So as Martha and Art mentioned, Sidewalk Math has a lot of benefits for young children. We know that young children learn through play, as I'm sure all of you are aware. And one of the things that's exciting is these colorful decals and designs really invite children to play and use them in a variety of ways. But they also offer an intuitive way for them to learn the math concepts. As children play, they notice the patterns. They begin to count in different ways, and they're counting forwards and backwards. They're counting by multiples. They're counting on from a particular number. And as Art explained, what's unique about Sidewalk Math is that it uses patterns to encourage children to practice counting and building number sense in different ways. And this prompts them to build their math concepts that are going to follow them throughout their life. And what's great is that they're doing it while they're playing, and they learn that math is fun, and they're excited to show what they know. And they have a really practical way to do that and show off for their families and caregivers. Next slide, please. So research has found that when children engage in math activities, as Art said, it not only helps them develop their mathematical knowledge, but also supports their social emotional development, as well as their language and literacy skills. And studies have found that engaging in math talk prompts children's conceptual understanding as it builds their vocabulary. So one of the things that's great about the Talking is Teaching campaign is it helps families and caregivers learn how to use math talk with children and engage in those conversations. And the Sidewalk Math decals and patterns are designed to prompt questions that engage both children and adults. And if you look at this pattern that's on the slide, you can see just how it does that. For example, I might wonder, what number comes between 1 and 3? Or why is the first circle so small and the last circle is bigger? And having conversations like that with children, sharing what I wonder about as an adult, can prompt children to come up with their own questions. And it provides these opportunities for building conversations. It also allows parents to join with their children in playing with these patterns and invites them to explore and discover ways to be curious about what they might find. Next slide, please. So research has also shown that curiosity and being curious is an even better predictor of math and literacy achievement when children enter school than specific subject knowledge. And that encouraging children's curiosity can help build their academic knowledge. So the more we can get children curious and interested and excited, the more likely we are to help support their math skills. And one of my favorite things about Sidewalk Math is that it not only encourages children's curiosity and play, but adults want to join in the fun too. That it provides an endless opportunity for conversations and playful interactions between children and families. Next slide, please. Martha?
Art, you're on.
Oh,
Who is it? It's me, my turn? No, I'm all finished.
Just two last pieces then. We do have a Sidewalk Math website, and you can just go to sidewalkmath.com, and all of the patterns and all of the resources that we've created, songs, games, playing, and patterns you can even chalk are available at the website for free. And next. We also have a footbook that guides teachers and parents in a variety of activities and gives the background for why developing number sense is so critical. It also has songs and objects and chalk activities to help teachers and parents count with children. So we are surrounding you with resources to transform laundromats. And thank you for letting us talk about this.
Thank you so much, Art, Martha,
Thanks,
Corey,
everybody.
for sharing a bit more about Sidewalk Math. We've just been so honored to partner with you and your team in turning these patterns into decals that folks can put in, spaces across the community, whether that is a laundromat, whether that's a hospital setting, so many different creative places where folks can put these, and just thrilled to see these coming to life. And now I am delighted to kind of move towards, well, how have communities been putting these decals into their communities? So let me move my slide forward. Oh, sorry, went too fast. So I am now, we're going to move to San Francisco, California, where I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Nidie Doshi, an amazing partner and pediatrician at the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital. For those of you community partners who are with us, I believe it was last year, we had a healthcare webinar where Nidie also joined us there. So welcoming Nidie back to this webinar series, and you just would love to hear more about your and your team's experiences with the Sidewalk Math decals. So welcome, Nidie, and thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mia. Really happy to be here and great to see such a wonderful turnout on this webinar. It's also just wonderful to see the full Sidewalk Math team. We have actually not met before. So again, just very thankful for this partnership and for all the work that you all have done. Like Mia said, my name is Nidie Doshi. I'm a pediatrician based at UCSF in San Francisco. So I'm part of the faculty department here in our Department of Pediatrics. And I'm clinically a general pediatrician. So I have my own primary care practice as well as see patients along with our residents and medical students and a range of learners in our clinic. A little bit about our partnership with Too Small to Fail and a little bit about our clinic. So we've had the pleasure of being a partner with Too Small to Fail since 2016. The main clinic that I work at is called the Children's Health Center, and this is based within San Francisco General Hospital. So this is our safety net hospital for San Francisco City and County. Our clinic is the largest pediatric outpatient clinic within the San Francisco Health Network. So what that means is for any of our all of our patients and families essentially have Medi-Cal or a San Francisco Health Network, San Francisco Health Plan insurance. And we function as kind of a pediatric hub for the safety net for the city and county of San Francisco. This gives a little bit of a range of, or some information just in terms of the scope of who we see. So we have about 32,000 visits annually across primary, urgent, and specialty care. San Francisco is a smaller city in America, but so we're not as big as New York or Chicago, but for many of our children who are here and on Medi-Cal, we are kind of the place that sees them. We have about 2,000 children who are between the ages of 0 and 5, so kind of within this early childhood community, where we are their PCP, their primary medical home. And you can see our breakdown there just demographically. We're primarily Latinx. Many of our families are monolingual Spanish or recently arrived or newly immigrated to San Francisco or to the States. We're about 14% African-American, 11% Asian, 4% white, and 3% others. So it's a relatively, our footprint as a clinic is a relatively good example of our population on the safety net and kind of our lower income population within the city and county of San Francisco. So partnering with Too Small to Fail has really been a wonderful way to bring really incredible resources to our communities who need it most. Next slide, Mia. So as an example, as we're talking about Sidewalk Math, this again was kind of one of those lovely things that came to me as a pediatrician based in my clinic, where Too Small to Fail kind of reached out and said, hey, we have this wonderful group of people who's doing evidence-based work around really trying to support the brain development of children. Would you be interested? And generally, my answer is yes, of course. This is exactly why we exist as a clinic. So this gives just a little bit of a snapshot of what one of the Sidewalk Math decals, this is kind of like the hopscotch one that can land, that can be on a floor, looks like. As you guys can imagine, the COVID-19 pandemic has shifted so many things in terms of our clinical practice. We didn't close a single day in the last 2 years. So our clinic stays open 364 days out of the year. We close 1 day every year, which is Christmas, but we're open every other time. And especially during the pandemic, I think our clinic, alongside many other FQHCs or safety net spaces, or for any of you who are on this webinar, it's kind of providing direct service. When many other places had to shut down or were transitioning to doing many things virtually, we actually stayed open because we were a healthcare facility. And our, you know, another amazing thing from the pandemic is our numbers actually didn't change that much in terms of the children who were coming to clinic, because children need vaccines and children need checkups. So it was a really wonderful way for us to also be thinking about, okay, how else are we reaching our population when maybe other spaces aren't able to stay open? So this is our current waiting room. We're getting close to kind of re-entering back into our traditional waiting room spaces, but this is actually our waiting room, which is a hallway outside of our clinic. We had to stop congregating patients and families into our traditional waiting room for space issues to be able to ensure the 6 feet apart. And it actually, in some ways, was kind of a silver lining because it allowed us to have a longer avenue, a longer pathway, a longer space to be putting something like the Sidewalk Math decals down. I think kind of similar to what Patty was saying and what you're hearing from the whole Sidewalk Math team, this isn't necessarily, you know, rocket science. It's also very much kind of based in the data and the evidence that we know now around what actually supports brain development for children. And these are small nudges. This is a small visual done in a really beautiful way that actually starts placing the building blocks down for all of our children's brain development. I think many of our families, when they were coming into our clinics, it creates a warmer sense of coming to the doctor, which is always a good idea. I think we felt, certainly, especially our nursing staff, who kind of are the connective tissue of making our clinic run smoothly, they really saw the impact for our patients, just in terms of having something brighter in the hallway, especially during 2 years, you know, just this time of incredible stress and duress that many of our families are under. It's nice to be able to provide an avenue that makes you feel welcome and makes it feel like it's designed for children. Next slide, Mia. So this just gives a couple examples of testimonials that we've heard, both from our staff, our patients, and other clinicians that I work with. I think, as you've heard the Sidewalk Math team kind of convey, these decals kind of invite participation. You don't even necessarily need to say much about it, but it's there in front of you, the same way that you see children and families at a playground. It invites participation. And I think even what Tonya Vega, one of our charge nurses, said, you know, unfortunately, we are in an age of cell phones and screen time, and that tends to be the first thing that we reach for as parents, as whenever you are waiting, you're kind of thinking about the next thing that you have to do. And it's truly remarkable how just placing something that is a relatively simple, straightforward art to a certain extent, it's a form of art in some of these spaces where we're seeing our families within minutes. We have parents who are, instead of reaching for the cell phone and turning on Cocomelon, which is totally fine when you need it, you're actually engaging with a shape or a number or a pattern on the ground. And we know from a scientific perspective, and even as clinicians, those interactions carry so much weight. So the ability to be able to do that in a clinical setting is phenomenal. This is one of my own families, a parent of one of my own primary care patients. And, I was just talking to her just a couple of weeks ago, and she was just mentioning that even especially when you're there, for parents, when you're trying to fill out paperwork that the doctors are making you do, and you've got several kids with you, it's nice to be able for them to have something to engage with while you're doing that, even just from her own stress level, that moment in the clinic. So I think the ripple effect of things like this, it's hard to truly measure and capture that objectively to say, XYZ creates this impact. And I just know that for me as a clinician who's serving this population kind of day in and day out, the warmth that they feel, the engagement that they're able to do, the lack of the lack of impetus it takes to engage is truly priceless. So just incredibly grateful for this partnership, and happy to answer questions later in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Nidie. And I gotta say, I remember when you first sent over the photograph of the Sidewalk Math decal in the hospital setting, and I and the Too Small to Fail team, we were so excited to see it. And then the Sidewalk Math team was so excited to see it. It's really a great example of, one place where these decals can be installed. And of course, there are so many other places where they can be installed. I'm sure everyone in the audience has already many different ideas of where in your community these could go. But as an example of another place or space where these decals could go, we are going to, let me see if I can go to the next slide. There we go. Go over to Elgin, Illinois, with Amber Peters, who's the executive director of the Elgin Partnership for Early Learning, to kind of share how her Talking is Teaching community integrated the decals into local laundromats. So thank you for joining us, Amber.
Of course. Thank you so much. And I appreciate Too Small to Fail and the Sidewalk Math team for spurring this conversation, because if it weren't for both of these platforms, we wouldn't have the opportunity to be together today and learn about other ways that we can engage our families. I hope that I don't have too big of an echo. It's Week of the Young Child, and so we're celebrating our future this week, and I am in Bartlett, Illinois, which is one of our 11 communities that we serve of 18,000 children birth to 5. So I am at their public library in a very small study room, and I'm just really glad that I could be here and also be available to our awesome partners. So we have 3 laundromats in Elgin. Elgin is one of our communities that has the largest need of children coming to school not ready for school. Prior to COVID, it was about 15% of children were coming to school ready. Now I would say that data is probably far less, unfortunately, but these are other strategies that give us opportunities to meet families where they are. We originally, when we started, when I'd seen that Too Small to Fail was doing language in the laundromat programs, I was like, oh, we need to do language in the laundromat. Let's write a grant for that and see if we can get these materials covered and get into some local laundromats. So my first step was calling the Laundry Cares Association, and they were able to get us hooked up with the first laundromat, which is Jet Express laundromat, and that is where we have the decals on the floor. And they gave me a phone number to call the laundromat owners, who are both pilots, and it was like a sales call. And I figured that he would probably block my number afterwards, because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they gave me this number of this guy, and he's probably like, who is this crazy Southern lady who lives in Illinois calling me? But instead they welcomed me, and we came, and they've just been a model partner for us to launch in 2 other laundromats. The one is Blue Kangaroo, and that is a much smaller space that you'll see in some of these pictures. And then you see the lady in the middle with the little girl with the purple coat on. That's a space, and it just kind of shows you that it doesn't really matter what your space is. It might change. It doesn't change the interactions that you have with the children. It might just be how you set up the programming, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. And then one of the laundromats is owned by a huge group of other laundromats. So I really have never met those people. The owners, I have talked to them, had conversations with them, but I think that is important when you're building relationships and trust, that Jet Express and Everything Clean both welcome me putting things on the wall and on the floor and whatever, just because they're willing to go the extra mile to really meet children and families. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I say on this one, better together, because one of my amazing community partners, yeah, go back to that one. There you go. I say better together because one of my amazing community partners helped me install the Sidewalk Math decals. She had the great idea of, I said, do you want to meet me there? Let's put them down. Jet Express said we could use them on the floors. You know, when you're asking somebody to put something on their floor, you know, you're not really sure how they're gonna react, but every time I ask Jet Express, they say yes. They're willing to really try anything. And so I so appreciate that, because I'm like, oh, let's try it there. And then we can show pictures and model it for other places. So the community partner, Tiffany from the school district, she came, and one of the instructions was to make sure that the surface was really clean with alcohol. She brought a spray bottle of alcohol. And I was like, ooh, that's the reason I have experts that I surround myself with, because they're smarter than I am. So she and I installed these. This location was really neat because they have the two tables in the middle. And so we were able to snake it around and really give the children space to move around and interact with them. The shapes and the colors sell themselves. We immediately started putting them down. And what did children do? They started jumping and hopping and counting and moving around them, as did the parents. So it was really an interesting, we immediately got up and started taking pictures, because I was like, wow, look what these kids are doing by just installing this one tool in the laundromat. So it was really fun. And then you can see in the top where it says, the top right where it says Everything Clean, that's another laundromat, and it's brand new. And so that conversation with them, they were so willing to use them, but they weren't ready to put them on the floor because it's brand new, and they weren't sure, like, let's let somebody else that's been around for a while test them and see how they do on the floor. So they had the great idea of, why don't we put them on like a tag board and use them in a different way? And so they pull them in and out. They used them for like a Halloween scavenger hunt around the laundromat, and they were able to move them around. So I like how people are, you know, thinking differently about maybe ways that they can use them. And I was so excited to see the chalk. I mean, what a great idea to use the chalk and be able to use it in different ways where it's not something always that has to be permanent. And so that's exciting. And you can go to the next one, Mia. Great. So this just shows you the all the locations all on one. One thing about the snail was the snail ended up going on a door or between instead of a window. For Jet Express, it was because the window was right beside the front door. And so we want to keep the children at the back of the laundromat towards where the books and the other materials are, because we don't want any, you know, sometimes parents are working on their laundry and they're not being watched as well as maybe we might watch our children. So we wanted to keep them back where the action is. So we put it on a door at Jet Express, and that has worked out great. And it made a door that was just plain, engaging, and a learning opportunity. I wanted to also point out that where you see the little sign Count Together, that also was from Everything Clean, that laundromat. The Harringtons have been awesome partners, and they were thinking differently again about how they could use their materials. Our first laundromat, we made huge, had these huge, beautiful signs made that use all the Talking is Teaching signs of, you know, ways to captivate your children and learn in the laundromat. And then they took them and they used them and they shrunk them down and put them on, because they have little tables where families can sit, and put them in these little, you can't tell this, but these are really small. They're about, you know, a 5x7 sign or whatever, but it's kind of neat how, you know, if you're just sitting right there at the table, they're up close and personal with the information about Count Together. And it also offers them the opportunity to not have all the materials out at one time, all the messaging to slide it in and out. So every time somebody comes to the laundromat, it's a new opportunity. I was trying to think, one thing I love the hospitals and the pediatrician's office. That's one thing that we would really like to, you know, get into all the federally qualified things. So we have ordered some for our WIC sites and get those in there, and the pediatric dental office also. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Amber. That was amazing. I loved hearing about the different ways that people use, that the laundromats use the same exact decals in various different, you know, strategies. Especially, I think the one where it wasn't on the floor, people could, like, you know, use them and have fun with them. And even the ones on the floor, just the photos of kids engaging with them and hopping on them. That's amazing and exciting to hear that you're going to be putting them in WIC clinics, which is yet another space where these can go. So thank you for sharing, you know, about how you approached, especially the laundromat owners, about this project. I think that's particularly helpful. And now we're going to pivot to the other side of that coin, to the business perspective of installing these decals. And, you know, what does that look like from the perspective of the business owner? So I am now delighted to introduce Brian Holland, who some of the audiences may recognize from previous webinars and meetings and summits. But Brian is the co-owner of the Laundry Cafe in Philadelphia, all around amazing partner. And Brian, would love it if you could share a bit more about your experiences with the Sidewalk Math decals, especially from your perspective as a business owner. So welcome, Brian, and thank you for joining. You might be muted, Brian, sorry.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. And thank you, Mia. I'm certainly grateful to be here. I totally enjoy our partnership. You guys have been just so amazingly supportive, and I think you're doing great things that really impact kids and lives. And we don't always see it, but we focus on kids. But kids, you know, they have another generation that follows. And I think the good work that we do is more enduring than just the kids that we see. So special thanks to Art as well. I just wanted to share that I happened into laundry. My background is about 25 years in executive leadership for pharmaceuticals. And this is my second life, if you will, to get into laundromats. My partners and I have 5 supersized laundries in Philadelphia. And we all come from pretty hard hit areas. And we recognize some of the, because we come from a healthcare background, but healthcare disparities, but there's also learning disparities, and there's quite a number of things. So kind of built into our mission are 5 pillars that really are about how we're going to affect communities. So that was our starting point. But because we were so naive, we looked at laundries and said, you know, pharmaceutical discipline, who are your customers and what do they do? What do they need? We recognize that laundries are pretty boring places to be. It's about as utilitarian as you can get. Everything is stainless steel and boxes and square. There really are no design factors that were built in. Yet 85% of our customers are women, or women who are accompanied by children. And so that disconnect was the starting point for us. Is how do we soften a laundromat and you know, bring in shapes and colors and things that might make it more inviting for families, not just for, you know, for laundromat customers, if you will. And so we started doing things early on that said we need to try and change the space a little bit. And we're so grateful to have the support of Too Small to Fail, and the fact that they embrace laundries as alternative sites for learning and literacy. And so these shapes really do, I mean, they're not just fun, they're colorful. They invite a very different type of experience. Let me step away for a moment. I want you to think just for a moment in your head about having 2, maybe 3 kids with you and walking into a Tiffany's. All right. Immediately you started to feel stress. All right. What are my kids going to do? I got to hold them by the hand. I can't let them go. Right. Well, that is not the experience we want for our patrons, our customers. We call them guests. Right. We want people to actually come to the store and have kids run into the store wanting to engage, because we know that customer is going to come back. And that's exactly what this Sidewalk Math does for us. I mean, it combines kinetics, that's the science, it combines shapes and colors, absolutely. But beyond that, it really does engage the imagination of children. And there's nothing better than that, right? So I would challenge you all that even though you see colors on the floor and shapes, kids see something way more powerful than that. And they immediately engage. You don't have to invite them. They just run to it. And to be candid, I see kids engaged, but parents are kind of drawn to it as well. And so, it's funny because when people come to our stores, they're coming to get a task done. That is their role, the responsibility. And they're trying to multitask. And kids is just one of the other things that they're trying to manage while they're there. And so, parents are grateful when they see that there's a place that warmly embraces families, warmly embraces kids, and gives them something else to do, right? And these shapes, Art, I can't tell you how important it is they naturally come and gravitate. You see them playing hopscotch on things that aren't hopscotch, right? And I would much rather kids be engaged in something that's productive and leads to learning than, hiding in dryers and trying to crawl into a washer. And I'm not kidding. I have one time when, those claw machines, I had a kid that crawled up inside a claw machine. That's because there's not enough for kids to do. When we keep them engaged, it's much more inviting environment and parents are more excited about coming back. I think it's a whole different thing. So, imagination, play, fun, all of that leads to learning. And I know that we're looking at, kind of the fun aspects of this, but this is important, particularly the environments. The places where we put our stores are all the absolute hardest hit in Philadelphia by design. That's where we want to be, but it's also where we want to have impact. And so we know that the more we can engage kids in learning, we can change the trajectory of learning for their life. And so it starts with things as simple as Sidewalk Math. And so I would invite any store owner, I'd invite these people who are really trying to get these into other locations to consider these. The words of Dr. Doshi earlier hit me so hard because I know that healthcare disparities exist, they're real. I spent, as I said, 2 decades in pharmaceuticals. And what we found is that I started with partnerships trying to get medical networks to allow our patients, allow our staff to join them and our customers to join them at their locations. And there was a block, it just didn't happen. But when we invite doctors to our laundromat to speak about healthcare disparities and to speak about, breast cancer awareness, prostate cancer, people come and they will absolutely listen. Why? Because it's a less threatening environment, right? And so when you change your environment with colors and shapes that are embracing kids and learning, people feel it. They may not be able to put it into words, but they'll say the vibe here is very different, right? The feeling I get here is very different. And that's what these shapes do for business owners. So I would suggest to business owners, whether they're laundromats or not, that you may want to consider you need a competitive distinction, something that's a point of competitive distinction. You need a warm and welcoming environment because many of your customers are going to be women who are accompanied by children, and you need to embrace families when they come in and to give them something productive to do. And that's exactly what this does, in my view. I think that it's not just about shapes and hopscotch. It really is about engaging families, engaging kids into a learning process that starts early and continues. And you can feel that environment. And it's so super simple. The other thing Dr. Doshi said is that during the pandemic, that the clinics were obviously working 24 hours. Well, laundromats were essential services as well, designated as essential services by Congress. And so we didn't shut down. Our stores are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And through the entire pandemic, all the civil unrest, all of that, we were open. And these are the types of things that you find are very valuable because the schools were closed. And so even more so, parents were bringing children with them at that time than even before. And so if you don't have as a store owner a way to engage children and families, it was really a disadvantage. And to be honest with you, a disservice to our customers because they do deserve this. And it's an opportunity. I feel we are privileged to serve the communities where we operate. And I think while we're there, we have an obligation to try and embrace families and give them a pathway to learning that starts as super simple as Sidewalk Math. So I can't tell you how powerful it is. I would invite you to just watch kids when they walk in and they see the things, they go straight forward. We use them to lead to the learning areas, right? So all of our stores, we have learning centers. We have an educational center we call them Replay Learn Centers, where we have books. We give away books every time they come. But these pathways lead them right to the book center. And they follow them. I mean, it's almost like, Pied Piper kind of a thing. As soon as they see it, they follow the numbers, they follow the shapes, and then they start to connect the shapes with the shapes on the wall. Another thing about laundries, which is kind of challenging, is that in order for a laundry space to be productive, you line the walls with dryers, right? The dryers have to be vented. They're usually on the peripheral walls, not on the interior. And that's what takes up your wall space. So you don't have a lot of place for signage and things like that. And in fact, the little space you do usually has all the litany of things, the do's and don'ts. I try not to do that in our stores. But the floor is wide open, and no one can argue that that's not just a palette, a blank palette for use. And kids will know. You don't even you can use the lower sides of the dryer. This isn't a good picture for that, but you can use the lower sides of dryers to put signs and symbols. And kids will always notice them because they're shorter, they're smaller, right? So you can get creative in your spaces. It doesn't just have to be the floor and the wall, the window. It can be the sides of the washers. It can be underneath the folding tables. All of that is fair ground for kids, and it's actually fun for them because it's their space, if you will. It's at eye level for them. So I would invite anybody who's considering it, know that it's all good. All of the positives that come out are just so very many. And people just feel lighter when they see brighter and primary colors in a space. It feels like it's family friendly. So.
Thank you so much, Brian. And yeah, I'm definitely seeing in the pictures here that almost walkway, hopscotch walkway towards that reading center, which is amazing. I love it. And thank you just for being an amazing partner always. And also really appreciate those tips that you provided us on, how can we approach business leaders or business owners about potentially putting these decals into other spaces. Some of our community partners may want to partner with local businesses, laundromats, other organizations. So what you said there, that this is an asset and it's a service to families that is beneficial for both families and for the business. I think that was. Thank you for sharing that. So now, let me see if I can, there we go. We're going to move into we have a good number of minutes for audience Q&A, and I'm just going to open up the floor to anyone who has any questions for our panelists. I do want to give a heads up that right after our Q&A, we will have a bonus session with Fastsigns, who is the decal manufacturer. So Pete from Fastsigns will be sharing, how do you actually apply these tips and tricks for like best practices. Saw some questions coming in on logistics about, how is there, how do we take them off? How long do they last, whatnot? And Pete will definitely be the expert here in answering those questions for you all. But if you have any questions for our panelists that we had already, the Sidewalk Math team, our 3 community partners, Nidie Doshi, Amber, and Brian, please feel free to put them into the chat, and we can definitely get to that. But in the meantime, while folks are starting to put it in, and I will try to keep an eye on the chat and make sure to raise some questions that come through. I just have one quick question for all of you. Feel free to answer if you have an answer, or sit out if you don't. We heard, I think especially from Amber, that as soon as you put these decals down, families are going to them and kids are going to them. But do y'all have any strategies for actually encouraging families to engage with the decals, especially in those early math-related conversations? And things that you might have done that works, or things that your staff have done that have worked? Any ideas or strategies there for how to encourage families to use these decals? I will open it up. Feel free to share.
I would say we have bilingual teachers and partners that go every week to engage children, and one of the best parts of it is that they're modeling to the caregiver that is with them on how to engage your child when you're in untraditional spaces. But our teachers also read books that also have math in them, and because math is reading, reading is math. And some of those key rich vocabulary words are words and that they need to build their brain and also come to school ready. So I think, and it also offers the opportunity to get up from the table, not to just read, but also to get moving.
Thank you for sharing, Amber.
Sure. I'm sorry, you go.
Go ahead, Brian.
I would just say that, first of all, it's kind of like putting, toys in front of kids and saying, do you have to really invite them to play with them? I mean, they're just going to naturally do it. I can tell you at our stores, we do story time, reading time, we give away books. We have a lot of things that are also connected to that. And so we are constantly talking to parents and saying, hey, listen, every time you visit, we want you to take a book for each one of the kids that you have at home. And because they know that we're kind of literacy focused and learning focused, it also invites them to play with them as well. So it becomes kind of a safe place to play. You know, one of the best kept secrets about laundry, which is part of the reason why I got in, is it's like laundry has dwell time, right? Unlike any other industry I know. When you go to the laundromat, depending on the size of your family, I can count on you being in our store for an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, perhaps more. And that's productive, usable time. No, you know, it really is, it's overlooked in most cases. And so people are hungry when they're in the laundromat for things to do. I got stuck in Chicago O'Hare Airport last night, and I ended up watching a TV network that I would never otherwise have watched. I ended up drinking wine that I probably wouldn't have drunk, but that's all they had, right? And so it's kind of a captive audience thing. Well, we've got a captive audience, and oh, incidentally, these people come back every single week. I don't have to get it done all at one time. We can sneak up on them with literacy every single week that they come back throughout the year. And so, you know, people just happen to engage. They're looking, they're hungry, they're hungry for content, and they're hungry for ways to engage. And this is just yet another way to engage. And this is kind of like the seed path that we get them to the literacy program, the book program. So it's also, it's a catalyst, right? It's a catalyst, it's an accelerator for learning. So.
T. Barry Brazelton, the great pediatrician, was a close friend of mine. And when he saw this, he said, you have to find a way to invite children into it.
Yeah.
And there was a picture in one of the early slides that showed me holding a child's hand, taking them through it and counting with them. And I would suggest it's always good to just take that first step, invite the child to come with you, and have them start counting with you, and mimic that for parents as well, parents and caregivers as well. So it really does work. Then the kids do it by themselves. They just need to be invited in. They need to know it's theirs to play with. It's for them, and they don't necessarily know that in their world until you show it to them.
The other thing that we discovered, whether it was teachers or parents, that asking questions was really important. Ask questions of color, questions of shape, questions of why are two shapes together. So it really does invite parents, and that's why it's the counting first, but then it's noticing beyond the counting what's matching that number, and that starts to build an awareness. So I think the more parents engage with children, and I do know, because at some point when my kids were little, we had laundromats and we'd go, and you had 30 minutes when it was waltzing around. You have 30 minutes, so it's great parent-child time, and it's an opportunity for parents and children to do it together. So the more that a parent can engage and ask questions, the more the child is going to be able to find their way. But as Art said, you really have to invite them because they don't know whether this is for them. And then once they have it, they're going to make up games that you wouldn't imagine at a school in Worcester. We went one day to observe, and the children were actually gathering little pebbles from the yard, and they were throwing pebbles and then counting the number of pebbles that belonged in each one of the squares. So that they love the idea to have it their own space and their own object and their own area to play with. But the invitation is, I think, very important.
And Mia or Patty may be able to offer some thoughts, but Too Small to Fail actually has some posters that we also use. And until your comments I wasn't connecting those dots, but it's like just little skinny long posters that say, how many circles can you find in the store? Well, guess what? You're in a laundromat. You're going to find one on every machine that's there, right? And then how many rectangles can you find? And so the shapes and the numbers that are in Sidewalk Math will obviously connect with the shapes and the sizes, the numbers of and then every one of the machines is numbered as well. So, I mean, there's a whole series. I know there's at least 5 or 6 of those. There may be more that I'm not aware of, but there are posters that could easily connect those dots. So
That's such a great idea, and just and making that just really explicit, and so that to the point that Art was making about kids knowing it's for them, and tying those questions and providing all these other opportunities for parent-child engagement and those prompts, I think makes so much sense. I love that.
Absolutely. And it makes
Yeah,
me
yeah.
think as well, we have various like early math related posters, of which Art actually helped us create like the prompts for a couple of them. So we had his expertise. And so wherever you place these decals, you could also consider adding these posters nearby as well to make the entire space a, talk, read, sing, math, and play together throughout wherever you decide to place these. Thank you all so much for just providing your insights into that question. I also did want to provide a couple answers to a few common questions I saw in the chat. First, yes, this PowerPoint slide will be sent to everyone, I believe sometime next week, and it will be made available on our website. We also had some questions regarding logistics in terms of like, how do we put the decals on and off? As I mentioned earlier, Pete from Fastsigns will be doing a bonus session basically very, very soon. So you'll be able to hear from him then. I think I got most of that, but before we actually dive into the bonus session with Pete, who is the owner of Fastsigns of Fairless Hills, I want to just give a few quick announcements. First, as I mentioned earlier at the start of this webinar, we are excited to share that the Sidewalk Math decals will be available for public purchase later in 2022. The date is still to be determined, but we will definitely let you all know when that is available. And while we don't have exact pricing yet, the Count Dragon decal will likely be around $170 each. This is that floor decal that goes from 1 to 12, various different shapes and size, and that you can just put around. As you saw, Brian put them leading to the RPL kit. Amber had very different versions of it in different laundromats, from actually being on the floor to putting it. I think, Amber, you said like some poster backing, I believe. So various different ways that you can use those decals. Those will be around $170 each, while the Count Snail decal, which is double-sided, especially good for windows, but you can also put it on the floor or the wall. These will be around $40. Again, all of this is subject to change, and we will definitely let you know when those decals are available for purchase, as well as what the official prices will be. For community partners who are actually receiving the Sidewalk Math decals when you requested them over the winter, just a quick update that those will hopefully start shipping in around 2 weeks. And so once they do start shipping, I will be sending along a survey and a photograph and testimonial submission form. We would absolutely love to hear from you on, where you place the decals, how it's going. We especially love to see photos of families and kids engaging with the decals. So please submit that form once you're able to start installing those. And now I'm very happy to introduce Pete Sepe, owner of Fastsigns of Fairless Hills, to share about some tips and tricks for actually applying the decals. And we will also be having an audience Q&A after his segment. So if you have any questions in terms of actual logistics of placing these decals, removing these decals, lifespan of decals, whatever it might be, feel free to put that into the chat as well. I've already written down a couple of those that I will bring up to Pete during the audience Q&A, but feel free again to put questions into the chat. And with that, I will turn it over to Pete and I will start sharing my screen again. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. All right, I hope you can all see that. And thank you so much, Pete, for being here, and turning it over to you.
All right, thanks, Mia. Happy to participate, happy to be part of Too Small to Fail, and Holland for getting me involved in the first place. So I'm gonna focus, when you get your packages, there's instructions on kind of the details of how to apply them. So I'm gonna focus on the moment on where to apply them, where it works the best, how long they'll last, and the best way to take care of them to really maximize the life. I could just give people a rough idea of how these things are constructed, so they'll have a better idea of where the points of failure are. So kind of starting at the top of the graphic, there is a laminate on there, which for one thing is slip resistant. It's actually UL listed to be slip resistant, and detergents on there, salt solution, acid, alkalis. If you jab a knife into it, it will tear, but it will take scuffing and general abrasion. Very strong material. You have the print. The print is protected from fading by the laminate. Then the bottom kind of constructed layer is the vinyl, which is very similar to the laminate, very strong material. And then at the bottom, you have the adhesive. And the adhesive is really where these things are going to fail. And there are things to do that will keep you from. I want to switch to the next slide, Mia. So what you don't want is you don't want water to get into that adhesive. So any surface that is porous that'll or isn't smooth will allow water to get underneath and will lead it to fail. So that means that the sidewalk math doesn't work very well on sidewalks in this instance. Concrete is not a good surface for it. Any surface with a lot of texture, rough, unfinished wood, carpet, brick are not good surfaces. Best surfaces, this is why it works so well in laundromats, are tile, vinyl, linoleum, sealed wood, with a finish on it. Those will work well. Not saying you can't put it on those other surfaces. We do apply it on carpet occasionally for the same material for commercial purposes, but it's usually only good for a week or two. Then you could put it on concrete, but because concrete tends not to be very smooth, water will get underneath it, and it'll fail fairly quickly. If you do concrete, I do suggest just sweep it really well, make sure that there's no particles, there's nothing on there. To what's left of true concrete without any dust or dirt, it'll last longer, but I don't recommend it. It will work outdoors. I mean, if you've got a tile surface outdoors, that's smooth, well, it'll last a long time. So long as you don't, we'll get to the care, you kind of take care of them. So long as you take care of it well, outdoors it should last as long as it does indoors. Let's switch again, Mia. Other enemy of the is abrasion. So anything that's going to cause the edge of the decals to lift up is going to cause them to fail a lot quicker. So when you mop around them, I recommend that you hand mop around them. You can use whatever kind of detergents or cleansers within reason that you want to use. But if you start bringing out the mechanical buffer, it's just going to keep on rubbing on an edge, and it's going to fail a lot faster. Really take good care of these things. They really should last about 6 months. The key to making them last. Questions?
Great, thank you, Pete. And I know we got a couple questions in, so I will ask what I wrote down earlier. And of course, audience, as if you have any other questions for Pete, please feel free to put them into the chat. This is your time. So first quick question that we got, I believe, I forget who asked this question, but Pete, you mentioned that these decals can work outside as long as it's on the right flooring. But is it okay if it is in a place where it snows a lot? Because I know you mentioned that water is bad. So if it snows a lot, will these decals fall off? And is that the best?
I think if it's the right surface, I think snow is not going to harm them. The enemy of these is going to be the snow shovel. So you think about how you clean up your sidewalk, you scrape the shovel along the bottom. That's going to catch the edge of your vinyl, and it's going to lift it up. If you find a way to avoid that, maybe throw handfuls of salt on it, I think they should last pretty well outside on a tile surface.
Great. All right. So the main thing that our community partners and other folks should know is that you can put them outside, but they can't be put on like a concrete sidewalk, or also probably lift up when the snow gets underneath it. If you happen to have tiles outside that this could work on, then that works outside. Okay, that's great to know. We had another question. I'm trying to pull it up real quick. How do you actually take off the decals if you want to? If so, do they leave some sort of residue? Is there a way to effectively remove them if the partner needs to remove them for any case?
So, the best way, so if it's on a tile floor, is to get some kind of, scraper And, if you can start a good edge, you should be able to pull them off. You may have to just keep on, hitting the edge with the scraper to remove them. There will certainly be residue left. There's a commercial product called Gugon, and if you get that on there, that'll remove the adhesive. It's good stuff. Should be available like any Walmart or Home Depot.
Okay, amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Another quick question, I think you mentioned this, but just so that we can reiterate, around how long is the lifespan for these decals if they're taken care of well and, cleaned appropriately without mechanical buffers or whatnot, and if they're on
A
proper
linoleum floor, I think these should last 6 months.
I offer thought because I know Pete personally, and I know how kind and conservative he is, and I think he's trying to live into his role here, which is to make sure that it's within the limits of the product and the product prescription. But I can tell you, it's been in our store. Pete, you're installed, and it's been there for what?
Well over a year.
Exactly. And I've got no frayed edges. I've got no problems. I mean, and our stores are mopped at least once a day, the entire floor, obviously, and usually a couple times in different areas. Where the kids are actually more high traffic areas, and we're using bleach and chemicals and everything else. And this thing has shown no signs of failure, as he uses the word. I have not seen that, and it's been at least 4 times what he's recommending is the timeline. So it's a great product.
Thanks, Brad.
I would also anticipate that the lifespan for things on the floor, like the Count Dragon, if you decide to put it on the floor, the lifespan for that would probably be a little bit shorter than the lifespan for something on a wall, which will probably stay for a bit longer, given that it's not as often walked on. Is that correct, that assumption? Okay.
I think the one on the wall should last, I feel like, on a wall, on an interior wall where it's not getting a lot of sunlight, I don't see where, any would fail.
Perfect. So a wall will last for a very, very, very long time for our partners. So that's something good to know. And I had a couple questions about folks who were thinking about putting the decals on carpets, because there are apparently a lot of different spaces with carpets. Pete, I know you kind of briefly mentioned about putting it on carpets. Can you talk a little bit more about the feasibility of adding these decals onto carpets, and should folks instead think about, Velcroing them on somehow? Do you have any recommendations for that if folks are really wanting to put them on carpets?
I guess, sense where you're using the native adhesive, we do this in a commercial sense. Somebody at a convention center or something like that may want to put floor graphics down. They typically only last 2 weeks in those, like basically the length of a convention, and then I thought too much about Velcro. I will say that I have, listening to people the way that they're using it, I do have some ideas of, ways that we may be able to carpet question, because I do understand a lot of libraries and a lot of ideas that I'd like to explore maybe afterwards with you, Mia, in terms.
Pete, I've got a question. I wonder if I was at one of the libraries yesterday and they had carpet squares that are they're super thin, but I almost wonder if a carpet square could be in that shape and color that people could buy, then they could put them around. They could use them in lots of different locations on the floors.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I was thinking, Amber, as I was listening to the team, was I have a partner who does make logos and things on them, and I was thinking that either you make the individual pieces like that. I do think how the carpet squares are finished, because they tend to fray, but maybe some of the other shapes, like I forget the one that's basically a big triangle, to just be printed directly onto a mat and then just delivered to partners that way. The other thing I was thinking about was that as I saw that people were applying them directly onto foam board or other materials, is that maybe the solution to the carpet problem is to put them onto a rigid backer instead of onto the adhesive backer, and then put essentially Velcro, just the hard part of the Velcro on it, so it would stick to the carpet. Do wonder if that creates a trip hazard, but I think it's something worth at least exploring.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing some ideas on that.
We did have a company that created carpets with Sidewalk Math patterns on them that worked very well, and we can go back and look at that again.
Amazing. And so, yes, just as a note to community partners, from what it sounds like, the linoleum flooring is the best option, whether indoor or outdoor. So if you have a space, or you are partnered with someone who has a space that has that kind of flooring, such as a laundromat, WIC clinic waiting room, hospital waiting room, these spaces usually have that kind of flooring. That might be the best location for these. But of course, you are welcome to kind of experiment and see how else you might put these decals into spaces. You might just want to put them on the walls, because for walls, it doesn't truly really matter. It's not as finicky as with the floors.
And Mia, just for clarity, ours are ceramic tile, right? So yeah.
So there are various kind of, I think in the slides that Pete shared, there are various different types. I think smooth tile, vinyl, linoleum, sealed wood are all good for these kind of spaces. And again, we will be sharing these slides with everyone. So if you want to look back at the tips and tricks slides that Pete shared, you are more than welcome to do so. And looking through the chat, and I'm not seeing, I think I got, or we answered most questions that folks had. So thank you so much. Oh,
Mia,
yes.
could I say something? I would love to just point out that Too Small to Fail has looked at a way to create these at a low cost, but you show that the profit from it, there's no profit to either Too Small to Fail or to the Sidewalk Math Leslie folks. They're being made just at cost. And if there's any profit, it's going to poorer communities that can't afford to buy them. So if there's any small amount, there will be a small amount. It will go to communities where they can't afford to buy them. So it's to spread arts, sidewalk math, as many places as we can, not in any way to create a product that we are out there selling. So the motivation behind this is purely engaging children and learning number sense, and engaging parents in talking with their children about math. So I think our partnership is one of giving. And I just want you to note that that's why we're doing it.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for raising that, Martha. For everyone here, as you all know, with our other vendors as well, Too Small to Fail never makes any profit off of any materials that we sell through our vendors. And this will be the same with these Sidewalk Math decals once they do launch, in that we're Too Small to Fail Sidewalk Math team Leslie will not be making profit off of this. It's really, we're trying to make it available at the lowest cost as possible, and so that these can be really shared throughout communities across the country. And as well, Sidewalk Math does have all of these patterns available on their website. I believe it's sidewalkmath.com/patterns, if I'm correct. And I've looked at them before. You can essentially go onto the various patterns that they have on their website and download them. And then you get essentially a blueprint that includes, this is the recommended length for how many inches wide or long this should be. So if you wanted to, you are more than welcome to take chalk and go to a sidewalk and put these decals down, maybe as a fun activity with families and kids. And so that is a lower cost version of integrating sidewalk math into your community. Of course, chalk doesn't last 6 months to multiple years, so you may have to do it a couple times, but it could be a fun learning adventure for families as well. So again, just thank you, a big thank you to all of our panelists who joined us for our webinar. Thank you so much, Art, Martha, Corey, and the Sidewalk Math team. A shout out to Ryan McQuaid, who actually helped design these patterns as well. He unfortunately couldn't join us here today, but shout out to Ryan. Thank you to Nidie, Amber, Brian, and Pete for being here. And also a big thank you to all of our community partners and Too Small to Fail friends here for joining us today. Before we wrap up, I do want to share some additional early math resources. So let me share my slide real quick. Here we go. I hope you all can see that. So first, I want to highlight Sidewalk Math website, where again, you can find the blueprints for the math patterns in case you want to start integrating them into your community right now with paint or chalk or whatever it may be, as well as their book, the Foot Book, which Martha mentioned earlier. I also want to highlight the Dream Family Math website.
Maya, you can get the
yes.
Foot Book and you can get the Foot Book on Amazon.
You can also get the Foot Book on Amazon. There we go. So if you have an Amazon account, you can go right there. Also want to highlight the Dream Family Math website, which includes free research-based materials and activities for supporting family math. This was actually created by the Development and Research in Early Mathematics Education. A lot of really cool resources there. So recommend that you all check it out there. And finally, a quick shout out to our early math related Talking is Teaching materials and resources. These include tip sheets, videos, and more, all centered on early math, some posters, as we mentioned. So feel free to take a look at our website, and you can, as Patty and I were mentioning earlier, there's a lot of ways that you can integrate these materials to whatever space that you might install these decals in. Finally, again, a link to the slideshow as well as a recording of this webinar will be sent to everyone via email sometime next week. And we'll also be uploading a recording of this webinar as well as the PowerPoint presentation onto our website at talkingisteaching.org/community/resources/webinars. Don't worry, we'll also send a link to you on the email via email for this for where you can find this video. Finally, keep an eye out for invitations to future Talking is Teaching Communities webinars, coffee hours, and office hours. If you would like to contact some of our panelists today, feel free to do so. Give them a quick email if you have any particular or specific questions. And of course, if you have any questions about your Talking is Teaching Communities campaign, or if you're interested in launching a campaign, feel free to reach out to me at mbielicki@clintonfoundation.org. So thank you all again so much for joining. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the Too Small Fail team. And this was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And we hope to see you again in a future webinar. So
What a thrill. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. I hope that you all have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And
Thank you.
bye-bye.